Well, it is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Leif Thompson. Leif, over to you.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I'm Leif Thompson. I'm coming here from Alaska, and I was going to make the statement that I don't think anyone else is here from Alaska, but I met a woman last night that came from. She lives in Australia now, but so I can't make that claim. These are musk oxen. I used to be a guide, and I'd see those out in the wild, not in winter, usually in the summer. But they're in a defensive posture right now. They either form a line or a circle to defend their young. It actually ties in with the topic of my talk. Should all children be protected from non-consensual, non-therapeutic genital cutting, or just some? The title of my talk today is Different Bodies, Same Rights, a Case for Unity Against Childhood Genital Cutting. The talk presents the question, should all children be protected? My occupation is as a family physician. I'm now retired so that I can advocate for children. So I've been retired for about 3 years and working in this space. I am not motivated only by what happens to children, but I'm also a victim of male genital cutting myself, and am motivated by that. My primary affiliation is with GALDEF, the Genital Autonomy Legal Defense and Education Fund, and I would like to announce that as of a few days ago, GALDEF is now a proud member organization of WAS, and we're very excited to add our voice to the passionate voices here that are advocating for sexual rights. I'm also affiliated with 15 Square, and as a peer support facilitator, that's okay. Well, I work with 15 Square as a peer support facilitator and helping men who are suffering from circumcision harms. I also work with Bruchim, a Jewish organization advocating for the inclusion of Jews and Jewish families that are choosing to opt out of circumcision. And I'm also work with doctors opposing circumcision. I'd like to thank Jonathan Meddings from the Darbon Institute for organizing this talk and herding us cats and keeping us in line. And I'd also like to thank WAS for having us here. I have no conflicts to disclose. Oh, there we go. So the first slide here is just embryologically, we all start the same. We develop with a genital tubercle as an embryo, and as we progress as a fetus, the tubercle will differentiate into male and female characteristics. At birth, it's differentiated, but the tissue they're homologs. In this illustration, like most medical textbooks, the male prepuce is vastly underrepresented and may reinforce the perception that this tissue is insignificant. But the point here that I want to bring out is that male and female external genitals are homologs, and there's no anatomical basis for treating male and female cutting as ethically different based on anatomy. Both excise erogenous genital tissue from the same origin. So I'm going to move on to other variations of sex characteristics. We have the male and the female, but there's also a group that has variations of sex characteristics. So in many ways, it's useful to think of sexual genital phenotypes as being a spectrum rather than being two ends of the pole. And I'm going to use this example as a way of navigating through our history of selective protections for children from genital cutting. So throughout most of history, children were seen as property of their parents. And they were not seen to have their own individual rights. This is, within patriarchal systems, this is very similar to past perceptions that women were property of their husbands. There's a power differential that happens, and children were seen to not have power and not have choice. This started to change in the 70s to the 90s with the feminism. There was a perception that the cutting of genitals without consent is a violation of human rights. The cutting of female genitals were seen as mutilation, reflecting these cultural changes. There began to be selective laws enacted to protect girls from childhood genital cutting selectively, but the other children were not yet considered for protections. I'll just keep moving on here. Increasingly, there's been a discussion over the rights of those born with genital variations. Malta was the first to ban gender normalizing surgeries on these children in 2015. Since then, Germany, Iceland, Portugal, and some other regions have added protections for intersex children from medically unnecessary surgeries. And I'd add the Australian Capital Territory passed world-leading legislation in this area in 2023. So now as we're moving across the spectrum, we're left with the final area of male children born with phenotypically male genitals. I say it that way, and I have to correct myself, is because we don't know when a child's born if their gender is going to match their phenotypical genitals. So in contrast, Western society has been very reluctant to include protections for children born with phenotypically male genitals. Male genital cutting is framed as a parent's right, and the boy's right to bodily autonomy is not considered, as it would be if we were discussing female genital cutting. This framework places greater value on the rights of cultures, religions, and the parents over the rights of boys to have a say of what's done to their own bodies. Even within sex-positive organizations like WAS, that advocate for sexual rights, justice, and pleasure based on equality, even here we find it hard to discuss male genital cutting within the context of individual rights and within the context of individual consent. Why might that be? One reason could be that all of us come from cultures who practice male genital cutting to varying degrees. Many men here at WAS 2025 have been subjected to genital cutting themselves as infants or children. Some parents here may have subjected their sons to male genital cutting, and some here may have even performed male genital cutting themselves. I'm not saying this to cast blame, far from it. Instead, I want to bring attention with empathy on how difficult it is to face this discussion, even here. Objectivity is elusive when we are absorbed in our own biases and our own defensiveness. It's not easy to engage critically in human rights discussions when it brings a critical light on our own practices. While I'm advocating for this discussion, I want to point out that this discussion is inevitable. As you saw it progress over the page, we are closing in on the last area of non-voluntary, non-medical non-medically necessary childhood genital cutting. This is an inevitable conversation that is going to happen. Regardless of how we feel, future discussions on bodily autonomy will include boys just as surely as the sun will rise tomorrow. The progression of our discussion of sexual rights, justice, and pleasure must logically go forward in the direction to include the rights of boys. Yes, this will be uncomfortable, but it's also unavoidable. I would like to switch gears for a bit and explain why this issue may have not grabbed your attention in the past and why the general perception is that cutting off erogenous tissue from a male is not harmful. I've heard many times the statement, well, I've never heard men complain. There is a dialogue going back and forth between society and individual men who are suffering from male genital cutting. I call this the cycle of silence, which leads to the prevalence paradox. So we have cultures where male genital cutting is normalized and expected. That is projected when men feel harmed by being involuntarily cut. They experience ridicule, dismissal, rejection when they're revealing their experiences of harm. Through that, they fear stigma. They fear social isolation, and they fear being gaslighted. They avoid expressing their experience of harm. This leads to the societal perception of, well, men don't complain. So essentially what happens is we have a system where men who complain are seen as being abnormal. In other words, something is wrong with them as opposed to what was done to them. To break the cycle of silence, we need two things if we want to understand male genital cutting harms. First, society needs to learn how to listen. And the second is that men with lived experience must be empowered to speak in a safe and supportive environment over what their experiences are. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on our terminology, and then I'll close fairly soon here. I taught a class twice now and the title of my class was Genital Cutting, Enhancement or Mutilation, a very deliberate use of terminology here. In these lectures, I explore a wide variety of genital modifications practiced around the world, what people choose to do for themselves, but more importantly, what people choose to do to the genitals of others, particularly children. My title very deliberately encompasses the neutral, genital cutting, which is descriptive, but also use the expressions of positive and negative values of enhancement or mutilation. The values we place on genital alteration are by nature subjective, not objective, so the difference between enhancement and mutilation depends on who is making the judgment. The person who lives with the results of non-consensually, medically unnecessary genital alterations is the one whose judgment should be most heard. I believe that our discussion of genital cutting practices is hampered when we believe that our value judgments are objective. They are not. There are cultural reasons behind this. Each of the valued terms we commonly use, circumcision or female genital mutilation, there's a historical reason for those. But my approach is to remain on the center category. You've heard throughout my lecture talking about male genital cutting or childhood genital cutting to be neutral. But my approach is also to try to focus on the bottom category of child genital cutting to emphasize the embryological homologs that we are all one, basically, with variation. And we need to start considering child genital cutting as one issue with varying facets rather than three separate issues affecting different populations. I want to leave with just a few more thoughts and then I'll close because I think I'm going over, sorry. We could forward on. The suffering from childhood genital cutting is not gendered. Child genital cutting is traumatic regardless of the genital morphology. All cultures that practice female genital cutting also practice male genital cutting, yet we use the term gender-based violence applied to female genital cutting, and I believe that's an inappropriate term when their brothers are being held down and cut right alongside. This is a violent act against children, and the power dynamic is not male over female. The power dynamic is adult over child, and we forget that boys are not men in waiting, representing the gender dynamic. Boys are children, just like girls. Worldwide, the prevalence of male genital cutting is far, far greater than the prevalence of female genital cutting and intersex genital cutting, but all cause suffering and harm. It offends the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights not to protect all children. Every child is vulnerable. Every child deserves protection equally. I'm going to just close on this last thought here that envisions a future. I want to leave you with this. Every child is born with a beautiful, unique, and very private flower of their very own. This flower has the capacity to bring them joy, pleasure, and connection to others, and even to themselves, giving them a sense of identity. It's almost magically a source of creation and the ushering in of new life. This flower is not shameful, nor is it trivial. This flower is sacred. A child's sacred flower is theirs alone, to later choose to share or not to share, to change or keep as it is, or even to decorate however they want when they are ready to do so. Every child, every human has the birthright to consent, to be able to say, my body, my choice. It does not matter if the shape of the flower is a penis or a vulva or something more and rare and special. What truly matters is that it's the child's private flower and not anyone else's. Our duty is to protect these children and their private sacred flowers from anyone that would claim them for their own purposes and violate what is not theirs. My vision is for a world where all children can grow up free from the violence to their bodies and to live an open future to choose what is done to their bodies regardless of the shape of the genitals that they were born with. Thank you.